I never expected to feel like a trespasser in the house I paid off 10 years ago. But that is exactly what happened the moment my son David and his fiancée Jessica moved their boxes into my hallway. They claimed they needed a place to stay to save money for their upcoming wedding. Being a mother, my instinct was to open my doors. I cleared out the guest room, put fresh sheets on the bed, and welcomed them in. Within a single week, Jessica's belongings began bleeding into every corner of my home. Her expensive glass skincare bottles crowded my bathroom sink, pushing my simple moisturizer into a drawer. Her online shopping deliveries blocked the front door daily. I didn't complain initially. I am 62 years old. I have been widowed for 8 years. And above all else, I value my peace. But that peace quickly morphed into unpaid servitude. Jessica treated my home like a boutique hotel where she was the VIP guest. She expected dinner on the table by 6 o'clock sharp. One evening, I spent 2 hours roasting a chicken with vegetables. Jessica took one look, pushed her plate away, and sighed deeply. "We only eat organic now, Kathleen. Conventional poultry is just full of toxins." I looked at David, expecting him to defend me. He simply stared at his smartphone, completely passive, avoiding eye contact. I realized right then that my son had not brought a loving partner into our family. He had brought a dictator, a woman who believed the world existed to serve her. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the chicken in the trash. I simply picked up my fork and ate my meal in silence. The very next day, I stopped cooking for them entirely. I bought exactly enough groceries for one person. When Jessica came down at 6 expecting dinner, she found an empty stove. They could manage their own expensive diet. But her entitlement was just warming up. Jessica decided the guest room lacked sufficient natural light for her morning yoga routine. She cornered me in the kitchen early one Tuesday, casually sipping coffee from my favorite ceramic mug, the one my late husband bought for me in Maine. "David and I need the master bedroom," she declared. It wasn't a question. "There's much more closet space for my bridal gowns and shoes. Plus, you barely use all that space anyway, Kathleen. It just makes sense." David stood in the doorway, shuffling his feet, suddenly very interested in the kitchen tiles. A weaker woman might have cried, argued, or reminded them whose name was on the deed. I just smiled softly, rinsed my plate, and turned around. "All right. Give me 2 days to clear my things out." Jessica smirked, exchanging a victorious look with David. She clearly thought she had bullied me into submission. She thought I was a pushover, an old woman too tired to defend her territory. What she didn't know was that I had already started decluttering my life. Moving to the smaller guest room provided the absolute perfect excuse to start packing my valuables. Over the next 48 hours, I carefully boxed up my husband's antique watches, my jewelry, my important financial documents, and family photo albums. I loaded them into the trunk of my car and drove them straight to a climate-controlled storage unit I had rented that morning. I was giving up my bedroom, yes, but I was quietly taking back my freedom. I let Jessica paint the master bedroom a trendy, cold gray. I let her hang her sheer curtains. She spent her evenings measuring my living room for new furniture she planned to buy after the wedding. I simply watched her sipping my tea. I didn't need to argue over square footage. I already knew she was decorating a castle she would never own. With the wedding just 3 months away, Jessica's financial demands escalated from subtle hints to outright commands. One afternoon, she marched into the kitchen and slapped a glossy catering invoice on the granite island. The total at the bottom read $20,000. "We need you to cover this by Friday," she demanded, crossing her arms. "My parents are already paying for the floral arrangements and the photographer, so it's only fair you do your part." I didn't even flinch. I folded the heavy paper in half and slid it back across the counter. "No, my finances are tied up." Jessica's face flushed a brilliant, angry red. tied up. You own this massive house completely paid off. You just want my wedding to look cheap and tacky because you resent me. David finally stepped in, offering his usual whiny tone. Mom, come on. You have the retirement savings. Can't you just help us out this once? I stood up, wiping my hands on a dish towel, and looked directly into my son's eyes. I am not funding a massive party. You live here rent-free without paying a single utility bill. That is my contribution to your future. I turned around and walked out to the garden. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. I immediately canceled the autopay for the high-speed house, Wi-Fi, the premium cable package, and the weekly grocery delivery service. If they wanted to play house and demand thousands of dollars, they could experience the reality of paying basic bills. The next morning, the internet went dead right in the middle of Jessica's bridal Zoom call. Her screams of pure frustration echoed all the way from the living room out to the patio. I just hummed a little tune quietly, watering my blue hydrangeas, enjoying the morning sun. The money tap was officially shut off, and I wasn't turning it back on. While Jessica obsessed over selecting the exact right shade of blush pink for the reception napkins, I was dealing with the heavy realities of life. My younger sister Margaret had recently been diagnosed with breast cancer. She lived 2 towns over, and I drove there quietly every Tuesday morning to sit beside her during her chemotherapy infusions. Margaret was terrified of losing her beautiful, thick, dark hair. So one evening in her small bathroom, I plugged in a pair of clippers. Without hesitation, I shaved both our heads. We sat on the cold tile floor and laughed until we cried, holding each other tightly. I didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to myself or create drama that would distract from Jessica's precious wedding. To keep the peace, I purchased a high-quality lace-front wig. It matched my natural silver hair flawlessly. When I walked into my own kitchen wearing it for the first time, Jessica narrowed her eyes, instantly suspicious. Did you do something to your hair? It looks stiff and completely unnatural. Are you trying to look younger for the wedding pictures? She scoffed, crossing her arms. I didn't explain Margaret's illness. I didn't defend myself. I just poured my Earl Grey tea, keeping my expression entirely neutral. It's just a new style, I replied calmly. She rolled her eyes, turning back to her wedding binder, muttering something under her breath about older women being ridiculously vain. Let her think whatever she wanted. Her superficial judgments meant absolutely nothing to me. While she wasted her energy critiquing my appearance, I was busy securing my future. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a carefully constructed shield. I had much bigger plans in motion, and arguing over a wig would only slow me down. I just smiled, took a sip of my tea, and walked away. The house felt heavier with every passing day, cluttered with Jessica's endless wedding favors and David's sheer laziness. I realized I was entirely done. I didn't need a lawyer, and I certainly didn't need a loud, messy confrontation. I just needed a buyer. I contacted a local real estate investor who specialized in buying houses for cash in as-is condition. He walked through the property quietly while David and Jessica were away for a weekend wine tasting trip. We agreed on a very fair price in the kitchen, and I signed the final paperwork the following Tuesday. The closing date was deliberately set for exactly 2 days after the wedding. For the next month, I packed up the rest of my life in plain sight. Jessica assumed I was just cleaning out old junk to make room for her future children. Make sure you scrub the basement shelves, she ordered one afternoon, stepping right over a taped box of my winter coats. I want to put a home gym down there by Thanksgiving. I just nodded, taping the box shut. The basement will be completely empty soon, I promised her. I systematically moved the last of my meaningful possessions, my favorite books, and my kitchen gadgets to my storage unit. All that remained in my bedroom was a single suitcase, my silver wig, and the navy blue dress I would wear to the ceremony. I even forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. David lived in the exact same house and never once noticed that his mother's life was slowly disappearing from the walls. He was too busy agreeing with his demanding bride. I slept peacefully every single night knowing the countdown clock was ticking. I held all the keys both literally and figuratively. They thought they had backed me into a corner, but I was already out the front door. The wedding day finally arrived, bringing a storm of chaos and loud voices into the house. Jessica ran around the bridal suite like a general preparing for war, barking sharp orders at her exhausted bridesmaids. I deliberately stayed out of her way. I dressed quietly in my room, slipping into a tasteful, understated navy blue gown. I secured my silver wig neatly in place, checking the mirror one last time. I looked elegant, and more importantly, I felt completely at peace. The long storm was almost over. At the reception, guests mingled in the grand hotel ballroom, bathed in warm chandelier light. Several of David's older relatives approached me during cocktail hour to compliment my hair. "You look absolutely glowing, Kathleen," my cousin noted, touching my arm. "That style suits you perfectly." Jessica unfortunately overheard this exchange. Her jaw tightened instantly. This was her exclusive day, and she simply couldn't stomach anyone else receiving a single ounce of positive attention. I saw her glaring at me from the head table, whispering furiously into David's ear. He just shrugged passively, staring down at his dinner plate to avoid conflict. I sat at a quiet table near the back with Margaret, who wore a beautiful, vibrant silk scarf over her bare head. We held hands under the table, quietly enjoying the overpriced catered chicken. I knew Jessica was brewing something nasty in her mind. I could see the malicious gears turning as she watched me smile. But I was entirely ready for whatever she planned to throw. I reached down and patted the small, heavy cream envelope resting safely inside my clutch purse. The night was still young, and I knew her ego wouldn't allow her to ignore me. Let her come. I took a slow sip of sparkling water, observing the room. People thought I was just a quiet widow sitting in the background. But I was the only one in the room who knew exactly how this evening would end. Halfway through the evening, after the cake was cut, the DJ handed Jessica the microphone for her special bride's speech. She thanked her parents profusely, praised her bridesmaids, and then slowly she turned her sharp gaze directly toward my table. "And of course, I have to thank my mother-in-law, Kathleen," she announced, her voice dripping with thick, fake sweetness, "who has been just so accommodating to us." She stepped off the main dais and walked right across the dance floor toward my table. The bright spotlight followed her every move. The room grew completely quiet, sensing the sudden shift in tone. "Kathleen has been trying so very hard to look perfect for tonight," Jessica continued, stopping right behind my chair. "Spending all her time and money on herself instead of helping her only son build a future?" Before I could even turn my head to respond, her hand shot out. She grabbed the hair at the crown of my head, gripped it tightly, and yanked hard. The wig tore free instantly, the securing pins violently scraping across my scalp. The cool air conditioning of the ballroom hit my completely bald head. A collective, horrified gasp echoed across the massive room. Somewhere near the bar, somebody dropped a wine glass. It shattered loudly against the hardwood floor. Jessica stood there, holding my silver wig in the air like a hunting trophy. A cruel, satisfied smirk plastered on her heavily makeup-covered face. "See?" she mocked into the microphone, her voice echoing off the walls. "Nothing but a fake. Trying to steal the spotlight on my wedding day with an expensive hairpiece." She laughed, expecting the room to join her. She expected to humiliate me completely. She had no idea what she had just unleashed. I didn't reach up to cover my head. I didn't shrink into my chair. I simply took a deep breath and prepared to end the game. Jessica expected me to burst into humiliated tears and run out of the ballroom. She wanted to break me in front of 200 people. Instead, I stood up slowly from my chair. I didn't cover my bare head. I didn't shake, and I certainly didn't cry. I looked directly into Jessica's triumphant eyes, reached over, and firmly took the microphone straight out of her trembling hand. She was too stunned by my calmness to resist. I shaved my head. I began my voice, steady, clear, and echoing through the dead silent room. Exactly 2 months ago. I did it to support my younger sister Margaret, who is sitting right here next to me, bravely fighting breast cancer. I gestured gracefully to Margaret. The entire room of guests stared at Jessica in absolute, unadulterated horror. Angry whispers of disgust ripped through the crowd like a wildfire. Jessica's cruel smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a pale, sickly dread, as the reality of what she had done set in. David rushed forward from the head table, his face bright red with profound shame. "Mom, I had no idea," he stammered defensively, looking at my bare scalp. "Because you never ask about anyone but yourselves," I replied calmly into the mic. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. The quiet, undeniable truth was devastating enough. Jessica dropped the wig onto the floor as if it burned her hand. She took a step back as her own parents glared at her in sheer disbelief. She had built her own malicious trap, hoping to destroy my dignity, and she had just walked right into it in front of every person she cared about impressing. The silence in the room was deafening. No one rushed to comfort the bride. They just stared at her, seeing her true character fully exposed under the chandelier lights. I slowly bent down, picked up my wig from the floor, dusted it off casually, and placed it back on my head. Then I turned back to the table, opened my clutch purse, and pulled out the crisp cream envelope I had been carrying all evening. I handed it directly to David. He took it with shaking hands, looking at me like he was seeing a stranger. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Your wedding gift?" I answered smoothly. He ripped the seal open and pulled out a single sheet of heavy paper. It wasn't a generous check or a heartfelt card. It was a formal, finalized notice of sale. "I sold the house. David." I informed him, speaking loud enough for a stunned Jessica to hear every single word. "The cash transaction closed yesterday afternoon. The new owners are tearing up the carpets this weekend, and they change all the locks on Monday at exactly noon." Jessica gasped sharply, lunging forward to snatch the paper from David's hands. "You can't do that! That's our house! We're supposed to live there!" she shrieked, all pretense of elegance entirely gone. "No." I corrected her softly, maintaining total eye contact. "It was my house. Now it belongs to a lovely investor named Richard." I picked up my evening coat from the back of the chair. "You have exactly 36 hours to get your organic food and your designer boxes out of my guest room. Have a wonderful honeymoon." I offered my arm to Margaret. Together, we walked down the center aisle of the ballroom, heads held high, leaving the newlywed bride openly sobbing in the middle of the dance floor. I didn't look back once. The heavy weight I had been carrying for months lifted off my shoulders with every step I took toward the exit doors. I never went back to that house again. I spent the weekend relaxing at a nice downtown hotel, happily ignoring 52 missed calls and panicked text messages from David. From what my former neighbors later told me, Jessica and David spent their first day as a married couple frantically stuffing their belongings into rented garbage bags before the new owner arrived with his crew. Having nowhere else to go, they ended up moving into Jessica's parents' cramped, unfinished basement. A fitting, humble kingdom for a dictator and her passive enabler. With the substantial money from the house sale, I bought a beautiful sunlit condominium near the coast, right next door to Margaret's building. We drink fresh coffee on my balcony every morning, listening to the waves. My hair is already growing back a soft, healthy silver fuzz that catches the ocean breeze perfectly. David showed up at my new building once completely unannounced, begging for a financial loan to help them get a real apartment. I didn't argue with him. I didn't yell or demand apologies. I simply didn't open the door. I slipped a $20 bill under the door frame to cover his gas money back to the basement and walked calmly back to my tea. You don't have to fight every battle you are invited to, and you certainly don't have to fix people who break things on purpose. Sometimes the strongest, most powerful thing a mother can do is simply lock her door, set a firm boundary, and finally start living entirely for herself. My life is quiet now, and it belongs completely to me. No one tells me what to cook. No one takes over my spaces or demands my savings to fund their vanity. The peace I sought wasn't found by changing them. It was found by removing them from my life. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's that true strength doesn't always require raising your voice or fighting back in the mud. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is simply removing your presence. As parents, or just as people who care deeply, we often fall into the trap of setting ourselves on fire just to keep someone else warm. But setting firm boundaries doesn't make you a bad person, and it doesn't mean you've stopped loving your family. It just means you finally respect yourself enough to protect your own peace. You never have to tolerate being treated like a guest or a burden in your own life. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to draw a difficult but necessary line with someone you love, drop a comment down below. We read every single one of them. And if you want to hear more stories about real-life resilience and finding your own voice, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow, and it ensures you won't miss our next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.